Welcome to episode number 4 of Ginger Snapshot Studio. Last week I talked about the Panasonic G7 and my experience with it as my first camera. And this week I wanted to kind of carry on or finish that conversation and talk about 6 things that was my takeaway from having this as my first camera. The first thing I learned with this camera was about the perspective of sensor size. How much difference it is, and I did do some research before, but as you know, once you have something, you're learning it more and it becomes more ingrained inside your brain to where you really understand it. But if you do an internet search for comparison of camera sensor sizes, you'll see that there's maybe a smartphone. They'll have a smartphone picture, a little square, and then I'll show another. It's quite a bit bigger actually. This one is than a smartphone, but then it'll have the micro four thirds, which is what this is, and then maybe an APC camera sensor size, which would be like the Sony A6500, and probably the Canon Rebel, some other cameras like that, and then the full frame sensor size. And there's a huge difference if you look in the full frame between the smartphones. That kind of really shows you the difference. Of course, they're progressing. Who knows what they'll have, in the next few years, or even and some of those pictures that you see on the internet are a few years old, and who knows what the difference is. But as every year seems like the phones on cameras get better and better, and some of that does matter more with the quality, but some of it does matter with enlargement. But so anyways, it's with the perspective, the sensor size, and then the quality. And that, when you ask about quality of micro four thirds versus a full frame camera, you're going to get so many different arguments. And I kind of argue it in my head even, because if I'm outside and I'm taking pictures of a rose bush with one of my Panasonic cameras, the micro four thirds camera, it's a bright sunny day, everything is perfect outside, I don't have to add any extra, my ISO settings set at 100, and I get a full frame camera and I go outside with it, and my ISO setting is 100, and I'm taking pictures of those. When I look at those, I think my opinion is that it's hard to tell the difference. And I've done that before with the Sony A7 II that I borrowed for a little while, and I tried it out and compared it with my Panasonic. And the Panasonic had beautiful color rendition, and I think some of those pictures that had a little bit more depth. So there was a real, it would be really hard to say which one was which. So in perfect conditions, the quality is going to be good, but the problem is with the sensor size. The smaller the sensor size, the less light that is coming in, and that's everything with photography. I mean, light affects everything. I mean, you're talking about the exposure triangle, and that everything about that is how much light you're letting in, how much light when you're changing your aperture, how much light are you letting into the lens? When you're changing your ISO, how much artificial lighting are you letting in? When you change your shutter speed, how much light is coming in? So all of it revolves around light and color. Color, you want to make sure you have your white balance right. And even today, I'm recording this with my Panasonic G9 and my Sony A7 III, and so there's probably going to be different coloring issues when you look at it. Like if I do ahead and use both cameras for the video, there's going to be a difference in color. But you have to work at trying to get the right color profiles and right color balance. But light is the biggest thing that you're going to fight with. And that was, I think a lot of times when we're limited, that's when we start looking for something else. And if it's working for you and you have something that works, then why not stay with it? Yes. But for me, I was limited, and I started to realize that I couldn't get the pictures I wanted. So I started to realize what the difference was in light. And so that brings me to light sources. So I'm trying to take Christmas pictures of the family gatherings and things like that. And they were grainy. I just couldn't get enough light in it. They were dark, or they had to add so much ISO in them that it became grainy. So the G7 does come with a little pop-up flash. It's kind of cute, I think. But as soon as you see that it's not very large, it's a very smaller size. So if you're standing directly in front of somebody, you'll be able to light them up. But it's going to be harsh light because there's no light modifier on there. So then that forced me to look at different lights. And here's the thing about that. I did that research and it benefited me to this day even, because then I started understanding about light sources and about light modifiers. So I did a lot of research on which flash to use and trying to stay within budget, and I ended up with this small little Godox, and it's a nice little thing, nice little lens, and it has these cute little things that change it to try to bring in some modification to try to soften the light. But if you point it at someone, you're still going to have some harsh lighting, and sometimes you can make that look like direct sun. I actually have pictures that I took of my stepdaughter, and there were harsh lights, but it looked like she was outside even though she wasn't. So then I started looking at what kind of light modifier can you even put on this. So if you have a flash and you don't have anything else and it's able to bend, you want to bend the flash to a white wall or the ceiling and let the light bounce back down. And light bounces so much. That's why I insisted, and why we painted my studio pure. Now I have a backdrop behind me here, but the studio itself is all pure white. Valsar pure white. It does bounce a lot, and the ceiling is white, so I do bounce light, and it kind of becomes a reflector, if you will. But you can get these little things that become a reflector. And then, I got this one that you put on there, and then it fits on the camera, and you point out it with that. Now this particular one, you can stand it up, which is kind of cool, so you can have it off camera and still work it. But as soon as you take it off the camera, there's a little shoe on here, and as soon as you take it off there, you're going to have to put a light modifier on there. And it just slides on there, and it controls it the same as your flash would. So, like I said, I learned a lot about light sources and how to soften light and how much it mattered. You're taking pictures, so the quality of light and light sources was a big thing that I learned, especially when I'm taking pictures of people. And where are we at? Lens number 3. 3 and 4 go together. So 3 is lens sizes and number 4 is lens choices. So that was like probably the biggest thing I learned was in lens sizes, because I have little charts. I have a ton of little charts saved on my iPad that shows that if I take a picture here, how much is going to be in the frame, and how much is going to be in the frame if I use this size lens. And so you go from anything from a wide angle lens of 20 millimeter up to maybe a 200 millimeter. And I do have a 200 millimeter lens. So you go from those, and you see how much will fit in the frame. But until you have it, you're not really understanding how far back you have to be to get those things in frame. And I'll tell you, a friend of mine went on a photo shoot, and she had a really nice lens, but I think it was a 100 millimeter lens or maybe 150 millimeter lens, high quality lens. She's out there on the shoot, and she had a family, and she didn't have a big space for whatever park they were at. And she said, she came back, and I'm like, well, how did it go? And she's like, well, I couldn't get back far enough. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, there just wasn't room, and I couldn't get back far enough. Well, after I had my camera and I was taking pictures, and like I said, I was in a spare bedroom of our house that I was even setting things up. I didn't really realize it, so I started with, when I first started, I had the kit lens. And so then that's quality. Most people start with a kit lens. And then I moved up to the 25 millimeter lens. And that's where the perspective comes into it, because I learned that the 25 millimeter on a micro four thirds is equivalent to a full frame 50 millimeter lens. And that was what was kind of cool about trying to do comparison. It was exactly ×2 to get the full frame. So this is a 25 millimeter lens, and it's equivalent to a 50 millimeter lens on a full frame camera. And that I got with that because that's what most people will consider a great walk around lens. A 50mm is great, what your eyes can see, what your natural eye sees. When you get down to 35-20, that you got some a little bit of distortion because you're trying to put more into it, and then you go on up and you're going to get a different type of distortion. But so I started with the 25, and then I moved up to the 42.4. And this was my favorite lens. It still is. And it's a great portrait lens. It is the same as an 85mm on a full frame camera. And so, when I bought the Panasonic G7, I liked it because it was a smaller size. And I will say this, that you think, well, it won't matter because, what's a pound of difference? But when you're outside, like walking around the zoo all day with your kids and you're taking pictures, a smaller camera is like so much easier to carry. And so I have this here to show. So this is, these are equivalently, if you look at it, they're the same. So this is going to shoot the same as a 85mm on a full frame. So this is my Panasonic 42.4 and this is my Sony 85mm lens, and it's just there's just so much difference in size, and it's like, you look at this, I think it's so cute, but I love this, and I learned really quick that when you're looking at different lenses, like people, you first start out, you think, why would anybody pay $3,000 for a lens? Well, I haven't paid that much for anyone yet because I just haven't, but boy, oh boy, did I learn that there's a difference in quality. There are different mechanisms in them, and it's really worth it to. And here's the thing: it's the amount of work that you're doing. I could get the same picture with this lens as I could this lens, but it was easier with this one. I did less work because the lens was focusing so much faster and more accurately than I could. So. I just learned a lot about the choice of lens had to do with, so your size, so I'm talking about lens sizes, and number 4, your lens choices. So your lens size is going to matter with the space that you're in. So like I said, these are probably my favorite, is with the 85 or 42.4. That's my favorite lens, and I just like them for portrait. And if I was in the studio doing adult headshots, I would use the 85 all day long, and I would love it. But when you're in a small space, you can't get everything in there. You're going to be right on top of somebody, and it depends on how, if you have a macro lens, it'll focus, but some of those you have a minimum distance, and that's another thing I learned, of how far away you can be. And that matters when you're taking pictures of newborns, because you have to be far enough away that you can get them in focus, but close enough that you can actually keep your hands on them, because that's, just for safety reasons. So you have to have the appropriate lenses. And then in a small space, trying to back up, I think I've said that before. Actually, I don't remember if I said it in this video or another one, but just taking pictures in that spare room of ours, and I'm taking pictures and I'm trying to open up the closet doors, and I'm in the back of the closet to be able to get a picture because I couldn't back up enough. And so that's why, I rarely was even able to use this lens until I got into my real studio here. And then some of them do autofocus, some of them have stabilization, some of them have manual focus. Brands, like when you're looking at brands, in my personal opinion, if you want a good lens, buy what's native to the camera. So if you get a Panasonic, get a Panasonic lens, or if you got a Sony, get a Sony lens. And there are some good brands out there. And in my groups, newborn groups, there are people that use this Sigma 35mm, and they love it. I mean, there's a ton of people that use it, and then there's people that swear by a Samyang. But I just know that I bought some off-brand lenses, trying to save some money, and one of them was a macro lens, and it was terrible quality, and I regret wasting the money on it. So I would do a research on that to see which one you could use. All right, number 5, where to buy it. So I guess I have a lot of questions for people starting out that they ask, where did you buy your camera? Where can you buy your camera? That type of thing. And so I would say most everything you can buy online, and everybody knows that. when I finally had the money and made the decision that I'm getting the Panasonic G7, I wanted to physically go to the store and get it. And that's what I did. I went to Best Buy. And that here locally in Wichita, that's about one of your only choices. There are a couple of mom and pop shops in town, but it seems like they focus more on camera repair and things like that, but and larger cameras. But I knew that Best Buy I had a son-in-law that worked there too, and he was an expert on everything camera, so it was a lot safer thing for me to do was to go there and get it. Everything after that probably was on Adorama and B&H. I think I might have bought one other lens at Best Buy, but most everything else was online with Adorama and B&H out of New York City. They're both excellent. You get free shipping and great customer service and great information. They email you back and say they want to be your concierge and try to help you get used to that lens or that camera. And they have tons of information on the YouTube to teach you about using it. And then everything else after that, you're like, well, when you first start out, you're just, where do you get anything? And I know you can get everything on Amazon, and I probably did get everything on Amazon. I've got lots of different straps. I don't know, I probably went through 5 different camera bags. I got a free one with the camera, and then it could hold the camera, and that was it. So if you just want to take it and have it protected, that's fine. But I'm one of these people that take half the house with them, and so I like to have extra batteries, and I like to have an extra flash with me, and I like to have all the lenses that I have, so that I can take what I want to take with me. And so, I just bought different ones, and most of those some of them were on Adorama, but most of those were off of Amazon. Okay, so the last point, or the last thing I learned with this Panasonic G7 was buy what you can when you can. So that's probably the most important thing of anything that I will say on this video is buy what you can when you can. No regrets, no shame. Just do what you can when you can and enjoy it. I can't say that I fully did that, but I learned the lesson of that. So when I bought that, I did buy what I could when I could, and I did my best research possible. But then I worried about it. It's like I didn't get to enjoy it as much. Well, did I buy it? Should I have bought this? And should I have done this? Buyer's remorse, But it's just like you're always going to find somebody that has. I mean, if you go out and, like for me right now, if I had the money, I would buy one of the new Sonys. And if I buy that tomorrow, I'll probably run into somebody else that has the newer one. You just can't try to keep up with everybody else, and everybody's going to have an opinion. I mean, there's the Canon, Nikon, Sony war is kind of like the Dodge, Chevy, Ford war. It just goes on. You just have differences of opinion all the time, and I just say buy what you can, and don't regret it, because. Do I use this now for my professional photography? Nope, and I'm not going to, but I don't regret it. I learned so much, and I'm so thankful that I was able to have that, and I was thankful that I was able to upgrade. So no shame. That's what my husband says a lot. There's no shame in this house. So that's what I would say is buy what you can for photography, learn what you can, do what you can, and enjoy life. And that's the note I'll end on. So I think next time I'll talk about my Sony, and then I'm going to start moving into hopefully some things about newborn specific, or some things about my studio, because I really am anxious to kind of show how you set up for newborns, and how you do lighting for newborns, how you light for headshots, and maybe some of the equipment I have in here. So I hope to see you next time. Don't forget, hit like and subscribe, and that's it. Bye.